In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Getting down to work. The papacy is one of the world's oldest and most prestigious jobs. Requires you to wake up early and work all through the day and the evening with a breakfast for the mid-afternoon siesta, which is as much a tradition in the Vatican as it is throughout the rest of Italy. Every day you will face a busy schedule of meetings, special audiences, and paperwork as you juggle the worldwide affairs of the church with the nitty-gritty of the running of the Vatican itself. Fortunately, you work in world-class facilities, and a loyal staff of expert subordinates stand ready to help you keep on top of things. Your office, right next to your living quarters, is host to constant flows of visitors from your personal secretaries to the high-ranking cardinals. What's your job description? Your job description can be broken down into a number of different and often overlapping roles. You are the vicar of Christ. You are Christ's representative on earth, the keeper of the faith for the church. You are the Pontifex Maximus. You are the supreme pontiff of the church. This gives you the last word on all manners of faith, ethics, and discipline within the organization. The members of the church consider your word and manners of faith morality infallible. You can appoint cardinals and archbishops and bishops as you see fit, and you can discipline and silence members of the church who perform heresy as you define it. You also write and release periodic encyclicals to bring attention to your particular philosophies that you espouse. Your main goal as leader of the church is to bring coherence and unity to the believers. You are the Bishop of Rome. You oversee the pastoral needs of the city's faithful. Additionally, as the top bishop, you lead by example for bishops all over the world. You have the authority to teach and discipline all the other members of the clergy. You are a head of state. You lead the Vatican city-state. The VC has full diplomatic relations with most other countries and maintains permanent observer status at the United Nations. The president of the Governatorate, who acts as mayor of the VC, oversees much of the VC's everyday business, but he answers directly to you. You are the outspoken mouthpiece of the values of the church. Since John Paul II, who transformed his papacy into a global pulpit, you are expected to speak as the voice of conscience, articulating the needs of the world's poor and powerless, and calling out the despotic world leaders and regimes. Your titles. You are now officially the Bishop of Rome, the Vicar of Jesus Christ, the successor to the Prince of the Apostles, the Supreme Pontiff, the Universal Church, the Patriarch of the West, the Primate of Italy, Archbishop and Metropolitan of the Province of Rome, the Sovereign of Vatican City, and the Servant of the Servants of God. This is from Piers Marchant's How to Be the Pope, which is a delightful little book. If you can find it, I suggest you get it, because it's really good.
The Abracast. Occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Welcome. We're recording this evening from the Vatican III, which is, I don't know, like right outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm John Towers, and this is the Abercast. So, one of last week's bonus, actually the only bonus. So, this show is a weekly show, but I always overproduce for you guys. So, the show that gets released on Sunday is usually like the on-point show. It's what is planned. It's what's published in the Fulgar Correspondentia or the newsletter. And it's usually occult, history, conspiracy, or violence. But we do a series of, bonus shows. Usually one, maybe two a week. And because of how crazy the world has been, we've been doing, Wednesday's bonus show was about pandemic stuff. But last week's bonus show, we were talking about Catholic anti-communism, because communism has really become a forefront of some of these bonus shows. Starting with the Chaz or whatever. Actually, it started before this whole thing kicked off. Is like in a kind of a way, when the whole Antifa BLM thing happened, I dusted off my old copy of the coming insurrection, and it just kept going from there. So last week we did a Catholic anti-communism thing where we looked at from post-World War II to John Paul II and the strong bent of Catholics. They were bent towards anti-communism, and things have obviously changed. If you look around in the world and you listen to what this new Pope is saying and doing and not saying specifically, you can see that things have changed. And as the Catholic Church has kind of changed their tune on communism, I hear out there that a lot of Protestantism is kind of changing too. So before I get into all of this stuff, if you're a church, I don't know how many churchgoers actually would listen to this show, and listen to the things that I'm talking about. But if you're in a church where the pastor is out there and he's talking about social justice and racial equity, I'm not talking about racial equality. There's a gigantic difference between racial equity and racial equality. So if your dude's out there talking about these social justice causes and he's talking about equity, you need to run. You need to get the fuck out of that church. Find another church. Get up there. Get your torches and your pitchforks and get that guy out of there, and you take over. Somebody do something. But from what I understand is this is becoming kind of like a staple or a feature of Protestantism in America. We talked about in the ecumenical, God damn it, what was it called? Intersectional ecumenicism episode. We talked about how the Presbyterians have adopted aspects of this idea, and also the Southern Baptists have adopted this kind of social justice sort of platform. So I mean, it's spreading, and it's awful. And if you are a churchgoer and you just are like, let's listen to what this silly motherfucker has to say about stuff, this is what I have to say about it. Run, or take it over, or get rid of that motherfucker and find someone that's going to tell you all about individual redemption is what we need right now. Fuck, I'm getting wound up. So, join me in raising a glass to my Patreon and Subscribe supporters. Thank you guys. Without you, it would be way different to do this. And also, I'd like to encourage you guys to check out the Patreon or Subscribe Stars. If you can support the show, that would be awesome. If not, do the 5-star rate and review, all that stuff everyone tells you to do. Just Hilla will tell you to do it later. So we have a perk for this month for the $5 and $10 tiers. We're sending out it's like an alternate or additional tarot card that goes with my tarot card deck that you can order right now at Habercast.com. The presentation on the website is pretty cool. It shows you all of the images, and I actually do a little video for each kind of septenary and then each of the suits of the minor arcana. It was fun. It was very rewarding to do, and I can't wait to get my hands on this wizard card. I want it so bad so I can put it in my deck that I use. I do a card a day on Instagram. You can check it out. You can also check out the image for the wizard card and the back of the card on my Instagram. So check that out. Okay, so we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about Pope Francis. So Pope Benedict was the other guy, and he did something that is pretty unheard of. He was elected Pope, and he stayed Pope for a few years, and then he quit. I liked this Pope. I liked Pope Benedict, I believe was his name, because he reminded me of the Emperor. He was like, let the hatred flow through you. And there was like some Nazi ties to him or whatever. But for whatever reason, he dipped out. And when he dipped out, the Catholics, the College of Cardinals, elected this new guy named Pope Francis. And this guy, so you'll hear, the deep conspiracy theorists will be like, well, he's a Jesuit, and they're not supposed to be Jesuit popes and all of this other kind of. We're going to kind of talk about all that stuff tonight. But there's a troubling problem with Pope Francis as all of this is emerging, and all of this problem with China is emerging. There's a problem with our Pope, with Pope Francis. There's a problem with what he is not saying, and we kind of need to talk about it. So people that are, if you remember when this pandemic first started, Italy got hit real hard, and the reason Italy got hit real hard is because they are tied to China. They're tied to China. A lot of Italy is being bought up by China. So the reason that it got hit so hard, and there's like cultural issues too. The Italians are real touchy-feely. They're very huggy and they're very touchy, and they smooch each other all the time. And those are the kind of things that aren't in the COVID-19 models. They don't take these cultural cues. I don't know. I don't want to get too far into this. We're talking about communism and not COVID-19. But I think there's something to be said about all of that, maybe for another time. So this first thing we're going to talk about is this Caroline Litton piece from the Daily Beast from September 2018. This is when Pope Francis is getting elected. Pope Francis is a Jesuit. 7 things you need to know about the Society of Jesus. Viva la Papa! Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Okay. Jorge Mario Bergoglio became the new pope on Wednesday, the first Jesuit pope since the Society of Jesus was founded nearly 500 years ago. What does that mean? A breakdown of what you need to know about the Jesuits. And look, I've had Joseph Atwell and stuff on the show before. We talked about briefly about his Jesuit education. So here we go. You may have a hazy recollection of the Jesuits from the day you applied to college. The Society of Jesus is more than an administrator of a prestigious American universities, also known as God's Marines, or, quote, the company, unquote. The order of priests and brothers was founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola in 1534 with 6 other students at the University of Paris. St. Ignatius had a military background, and early adherents referred to themselves as the Company of Jesus. Hence, both of the nicknames that live to this day, probably happy that the Jesuits were not forming their own church like Martin Luther a few decades earlier. Pope Paul III granted them commendation in 1537 to become priests. 3 years later, this gave them the right to become their own order of priests. And the head of the new order, Ignatius, sent his priests through the Catholic Europe to start schools, colleges, and seminaries. And by Ignatius's death in 1556, the Jesuits had already founded 74 colleges on 3 different continents. With missionary work as a core value, the Jesuits have been known for spreading Catholicism through the world. So, what's at the heart of being a Jesuit? Under St. Ignatius, the Society of Jesus believed that reform in the Catholic Church began with the reform of the individual. Listen to this. This is at the beginning. The reform of the individual. The founding members of the Society of Jesus took a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience under Ignatius. Current Jesuits take the same 3 vows today, along with the vow of obedience to the Pope. If the Jesuits are smarty pants Catholics this is the sass that's written into it. I'm not adding this. With a poverty vow, why hasn't there been a Jesuit Pope before now? This is the normie answer. This is not the answer you're going to get if you're asking like a deep conspiracy dude. Although Jesuits are now well regarded, the order wasn't always in such good terms with the Catholic Church. Look at its name. Jesuit was originally a derisive name from those who too frequently or appropriated the name of Jesus. Jesuits managed to retake the narrative on that one, and the term Jesuit is embraced by the order and has a mainly positive meaning. In 1767, by the charges of the Jesuits were too influential and elitist. They're like, when I was growing up, I'm sure this happens in every kind of, in generation. Probably not today. But when I was growing up, I was a skater punk in high school. And it was always like, I'm more punk rock than you, was like the attitude. It was like the infighting. No. I'm more punk rock than you. I haven't washed these shorts in 3 weeks. I'm more punk rock than you. I've seen more shows than you. I'm more punk rock than you. Nowadays, it's probably like, I have more My Little Ponies than you do. I have more TikTok videos of me with different hair colors than you. I've waxed my eyebrows more than you, bro. Do you even millennial, bro? Pope Clement XIV signed the suppression of the Society of Jesus, which was enforced in Catholic countries such as France, the Spanish and Portuguese empires, among others. But the order was not followed in non-Catholic countries, causing the Jesuits to continue in Russia and its territories. In 1814, Pope Pius VII restored the Jesuits, but not all countries followed suit. In fact, Switzerland banned the Jesuits in the Constitution, which was not lifted until a national vote in 1973. 1973. Jesuits are free thinking What does that mean? Also, the poverty vow, does that mean Jesuits are socialists? The Jesuits encourage, this was written in 2018, the Jesuits encourage toleration for other religions, teach other theology in their institutions. So the reason that this episode is coming right now is because, well, A, I couldn't fit it into last Friday's episode, and B, I had to do the intersectional ecumenicism episode before this. So I'm going to just read this. For me, not for you. The Jesuits encourage toleration for other religions, teach other theology in their institutions, and also believe in free education for all. This emphasis on free thinking, and especially the order's opposition to opulent riches, has some calling them out as the founders of socialism. Pope John Paul II, for instance, denounced some Jesuits in Latin America, which is where Jorge Bagadonitz comes from. Their emphasis on liberation theology, which we all know about liberation. We all should know about liberation theology by now, which is focused on the liberation of oppressed people, particularly the poor, from their rich oppressors. But perhaps the most damning link to socialism comes from Fidel Castro, the former Cuban dictator, studied under the Jesuits for 12 years. Although Castro later forced his former teachers to leave in 1961. This is what happens when anyone becomes a tyrant. They get rid of everyone that helped them to get there. That's just a historical fact. That's why all you people yanking statues down, you need to fucking pay attention to what's happening. Because you might not be next, but you should be warming up. All right, we're going to talk about, we're jumping articles to this article by Caleb Bell, Religion News Service, March 14th, 2013. This is the Washington Post. The article is entitled, "Why the First Jesuit Pope is a Big Deal." Jesuits are bound by an oath not to seek higher office in Roman Catholic Church, and now one of them has been elected to the highest office, the Bishop of Rome, the Vicar of Christ, and the Pontifex Maximus. Pope Francis, the first Jesuit to become Pope, not only represents a paradox for the papacy, but also the larger history of the Society of Jesus, as the Jesuits are formally known. On one hand, Jesuits aren't supposed to be in a position of authority, said the Reverend Joseph Fiesco, a Jesuit and founder of Ignatius Press. On the other hand, they're supposed to be obedient to the Church. The Jesuits have played a key role in the history of the Church for centuries. They have served as its leading missionaries, found its most prestigious universities, and committed themselves to the alleviating of the deepest poverty. St. Ignatius Loyola, a Spanish soldier, found the order in 1540 after being wounded in battle and having a religious conversion during his convalescence. Jesuits are sometimes known as God's Marines, after Loyola's military history and their mission worldwide. Yet despite their prominence, at 18,000 members, they are the Church's largest religious order. Jesuits have had a complicated history with the institutional Church and hierarchy in Rome. With its first Jesuit pope, things just got a little bit more complicated. With their emphasis on mission work and intellectual pursuits, Jesuits often work in the margins of the Church, sometimes overstepping boundaries set by Rome. It is a point of pride among some Jesuits that they frequently challenge authority, and they seem to have a predisposition for coloring outside the lines. Since their founding, Jesuits have consistently offended people. If there's a barricade, listen. But if there's a barricade in the streets, there's going to be a Jesuit on both sides of that barricade, said David Collins, a history professor at Georgetown University. I believe Georgetown University was at least started as a Jesuit college. I could be wrong. The left-leaning liberation theology movement has swept across Latin America in the 70s and 80s, including Francis's native Argentina, where he headed the Jesuit order from 73 to 79. So when you're the head of the Jesuit order, if I'm not mistaken, you're like the general of the Society of Jesus, which makes you something called the Black Pope, which is rock and roll. The Black Pope is heavy metal. In my comics, I have a Scarlet Pope, but he is not the Black Pope. Comics. This is just one example as Bergoglio opposed it. Many of his priests openly supported it. Here in the United States, the New York-based Jesuit magazine, America, frequently challenges the hierarchy, so much so that one of Pope Benedict's first acts after his election was to order the removal of Reverend Thomas Rees as the editor. This is all new ground, Rees said Thursday in Rome, where he's working as an analyst for the papal transition for the National Catholic Reporter. We have never had a Jesuit pope, so I think we're all trying to figure out how this works. It is a total surprise to everybody. Surprise to the Jesuits, surprise to the media, and probably a surprise to Pope Francis. This is something we'll just work out as time goes on. The Jesuits have also been accused of wielding too much influence, concern that led Pope Clement to suppress the order in the 1700s. Pope Pius VII, which we just talked about, restored the society in 1814. The Superior General of the Jesuits is informally known as the Black Pope because of the power the position has held in the past. In the 80s, when the Jesuit Superior General was sidelined by a stroke, John Paul stepped in with his own appointee rather than to allow the Jesuits to elect their own leader. Well, that's a pretty bold political step, I would say. I would like to know more about that. That was his right as Pope, but still discouraging many Jesuits at the time, said Reverend James Martin, an editor at America and the author of the Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything. With the Jesuit Pope, that cloud has been, if not removed, lifted much higher. Patrick Hornback, a theology professor at a Jesuit-run Fordham University in New York, said Jesuits are accustomed to the tensions. Jesuits are on the frontier and in the heart of the Catholic Church, he said. And when you are doing work in the margins, there's going to be some natural friction with what's happening in the center. Normally, if a Jesuit is appointed a bishop, he must first seek permission from his Jesuit superiors before he can accept the job. So what happens when a Jesuit is tapped to be pope? Most people think the College of Cardinals comes and asks you to take the job, and the voice of God is telling you that this is your new mission in life. It's pretty hard to say no to that. Collins, he says, hopes that the new pope will bring some of his Jesuit training and tradition to bear during his papacy. Wah, wah, wah.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that, plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
Okay, we're jumping to I always get amazed when I do this. We're jumping to the New York Post. Damian Thompson, July, this is very recent, July 29th, 2019, writes this article called "Why Are America's Jesuits Going to Bat for Communism?" Let's get into this. Last week, a New York-based magazine published a 3,000-word article about communism that failed to mention the murder of 50 million people, the lowest possible estimate by communist regimes in the 20th century. The rambling essay didn't once accuse Stalin's Soviet Union, Mao's China, or Potpole's Cambodia of killing anyone. Instead, it congratulated communists for fighting the violent capitalist economy of the United States. You would assume such squalid agitaprop could, I've never heard of this word before, squalid agitaprop. It's agitation propaganda, I would imagine that's the roots. Could appear only in a sectarian Marxist publication or on a website run by clueless millennials who have never even heard of a gulag or the Cultural Revolution. We just did a big episode about the Cultural Revolution, by the way. But you would be wrong. The author, Dean Detloff, is indeed a hardline communist. He's a young Canadian supporter of the Marxist-Leninist Party for Socialism and Liberation, which deplores China's move away from Mao's ideological purity and hates Gorbachev for destroying the Soviet Union. But who published him? Remember the last article we did when we talked about America Magazine, which is the Jesuit magazine? So who published them? America Magazine, the century-old Jesuit periodical that is among the most influential Catholic publications in the United States. How can we explain this grotesque lapse of judgment? Detloff isn't some crazy freelancer who slipped his propaganda into a current issue of America when the editors weren't paying sufficient attention. Detloff is America's Toronto correspondent. For 2 years, he has been writing partisan dispatches for America, making excuses for Venezuela's narco dictator Nicolas Maduro, glorifying the far-left thugs of the Antifa movement, and never missing an opportunity to depict the United States as the great Satan of capitalism. The United States is bad, it is not good, and it would be better if it didn't exist. And someday, whether by the march of historical contingency or execution or extinction, it won't, he tweeted on the 4th of July, which he called an aberrant and perverse holiday that Christians have reasons to hate. You see what I'm talking about? Something's happened in your church, bro. Hey, bro, something weird has gone down in your church, and you need to reevaluate what you're being preached. In an introduction to Animal Farm, never published in his lifetime, George Orwell described the severity in which the literary establishment has swallowed Russian propaganda. But he was describing English Soviet apologists whose silence about the Gulag was explained partly by wartime alliance with Stalin against Hitler. Detloff doesn't even have that excuse, nor apparently do his well-funded Jesuit editors. They are happy to whitewash and euphemize genocides in which their fellow Jesuits perished. Tragic mistakes. Detloff and his editors, by implication, reserve their anger for the unbridled terrorism of capitalism. God only know what Pope... God, this is the fucking Times, and I just found a typo. I'm a fucking comic book writer and artist. I shouldn't, and I can't spell. I'm fucking dyslexic. My wife literally needs to read everything that I send to the printer, and why am I finding typos in the Times? I'll read it like it's supposed to be said. God only knows what Pope Francis makes of this. He remembers Soviet tyranny, and he has never defended it as Jesuit provincial in Argentina. He opposed liberation theology, a strand of Catholic thought in vogue in Latin America in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that sees the church as the church's primary mission as the salvation of soul, not as the salvation of souls, but the liberation of oppressed. A liberation of the oppressed on earth, understood in Marxist terms. Too many computers, too many mouses. As pontiff, however, he seems unconcerned by the crushing of religion in China, with which the Vatican has signed a concordiant that grants the Chinese Communist Party a say in the selection of Catholic bishops. He has maintained a troubling silence on the herding of China's Muslim Uyghurs into concentration camps. When was this fucking written? 2019? This shit is still going on, this Uyghur business. But regardless of their views on Francis's pontificate, American Catholics should be alarmed by communist apologetics appearing in the pages of the country's premier Jesuit journal. It's of a piece with the preening nativity of countless millennial commentators, of whom Detloff is an extreme example, who roll their eyes at any mention of communist barbarism, an ideology drenched with the blood of Catholics, bishops, priests, nuns, and lay people, should never find a home in the journal devoted to the Catholic faith. All right, and here's to the last article was July 2019. This is July 2020, just to show you kind of a track, right? Shows you where it leads. Pope Francis's silence on China speaks volumes. The Pope dedicated a human rights said nothing on China thanks to a secret deal with Beijing. This is by Benedict Rogers, July 29th, 2020, by foreignpolicy.com. This month, the president of the Board of Deputies of British Jews wrote a most courageous letter to the Chinese ambassador in London. In the letter, Marie van der Zul took an extraordinary step for the leader of Britain's main Jewish organization. She drew comparisons between the plight of the Uyghurs in China today to the Holocaust. Nobody could see the evidence and fail to note, she wrote, the similarities between what is alleged to be happening in the People's Republic of China today and what happened in Nazi Germany 75 years ago. People being forcibly loaded onto trains, beards of religious men being trimmed, women being sterilized, and the grim specter of concentration camps. So, in case you haven't heard, me and a vessel of the art supporter, Matt, Matt supplies a number of links every month that gets put in the Fulgar Correspondentia. He's in a line. His situation right now is where he's looking at global problems and is spending a lot of time looking at China. And we were actually talking about this. There was like 13 or 14 tons. Listen to this. This is fucking crazy. And no one really is talking about it. There was like 13 tons of hair found in a shipping container, trying to make its way into this country. Now, the way that I understand it is it was made by the Chinese into like extensions, like hair product extensions or weaves or something, but it's human hair, and it's from these Muslim Uyghurs that are being put into concentration camps in China. Now, full disclosure, we know that this podcast is no friends. It's not a friend to Muslims, right? But at the same time, we also know that this podcast has a gigantic problem with people's liberty being taken away from them. And that wins. That wins. No one should be in a concentration camp. No one's hair. If they're harvesting hair from these people to make them into weaves, what do you think they're doing with their fucking livers and their kidneys and all of this other kind of stuff? And here we go. We got the Black Pope here saying nothing. Listen. Van der Zil is just one of many faith leaders to speak out against the atrocities being committed by Xi Jinping. But one of the voices has been strangely absent, that of Pope Francis, ordinarily a powerful advocate for the oppressed, as we've laid out these many articles. His silence speaks to the dangers of the deal made with China by the Vatican and demands that others in the church speak out. Before Van der Zil's letter, there was a decision made by Jewish News to highlight the discovery of, 13 tons of Uyghur hair with a Nazi resonance on the front page of the newspaper. The letter was followed by a Twitter thread. A widely respected former chief rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, who wrote, "As a Jew, knowing our history, the sight of people being shaven-headed, lined up, boarded onto trains, and sent to concentration camps is particularly harrowing. That people in the 21st century are being murdered, terrorized, victimized, intimidated, and robbed of their liberties because of the way they worship God is a moral outrage. Here's to you, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs." I agree. It is a political scandal and a desecration of faith itself. Around the same time, Majid Nawaz, a prominent Muslim counter-extremist activist, went on a hunger strike for the Uyghurs. Nawaz, a former radical Islamist who now devotes his time to fighting intolerance of all kinds, courageously and successfully promoted a petition for a parliamentary debate on opposing Magnitsky-style sanctions on the Chinese regime for its treatment of the Uyghurs. Last Saturday, the president of the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference, the outspoken Cardinal Charles Bo of Myanmar, released a statement mostly about Turkey's Hagia Sophia Mosque, which included, in China, the Uyghur Muslims are facing what amounts to to some of the contemporary world's most mass atrocities, I urge the international community to investigate. Yet so far, the world has heard nothing from the world's major Muslim and Christian leaders. Muslim minority countries have mostly sided with China, shamefully, and in pursuit of narrow and elusive economic interests. I'm going to editorialize a little bit about this at the end, right? The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has said nothing, neither has Pope Francis. It is Francis' silence that shocks me the most. Almost every Sunday he prays the Angelus and rightfully references some injustice somewhere in the world, and he has spoken often in the past, not only in the persecution of Christians in the world, but the plight of the Rohingya in Myanmar, and the conflict in Syria and Yemen and Ukraine and Nigeria, and the religious freedom for all. One country and one country alone is noticeable by its absence in his prayers and his statements, and it is China. So the problem with Pope Francis, the big problem right now, or maybe not the big problem, but the big evidence, is his office published what he was going to be doing as a speech, and it talked a lot about China. It mentioned the human rights violations of China. But when he got out there and did his speech, all of that stuff had been scrubbed out of the release, the print version of the speech that was released prior. So that's very interesting. And another thing that's interesting is that I want to bring up is the amount of medicine that China produces for the amount of everything. I mean, if they stopped making like fucking plastic Star Wars action figures, we could probably survive that. You know, and maybe in a few years we could be like, hey, we don't even need a Rey action figure anyway, so fuck it, like whatever. But the problem is that they are tied into our pharmaceutical. The problem that I see it being the head of a household that needs a lot of medicine for myself and my wife, I am like, I can't believe these motherfuckers produce so much of our pharmaceuticals. And then I'm like, well, how come no one talks about this? But it's easy. It's easy if you look, if the scales have fallen from your eyes and you look at CNN or MSNBC or even fucking Fox News, every commercial is a fucking pharmaceutical commercial, which is why no one's talking shit on China on these on the news. The big one that I just laughed my fucking ass off at was when Trump was like, yeah, I'm taking hydrochloroquine. I'm taking the hydrochloroquine. I'm taking it in zinc. My fucking doctor gave it to me. I'm fucking taking it. And like within minutes, that big-headed motherfucker, what's his name, on Fox News, Caputo, that big-headed, the guy's got a gigantic fucking head. That's all I gotta say. But he was like, he's gonna die. There's data saying that he's gonna die. He can't take hydrochloroquine, you know. And you're just like, someone had just a cartridge. Someone had a USB thing, and as soon as Trump said that he was taking hydrochloroquine, someone just plugged a USB port, like a thumb drive, into a one of this guy's fucking like teleprompters, and it just started spitting out all this stuff. He's gonna die. He's gonna die. He's gonna die. This is untested. It's gonna die. Well, the problem with hydrochloroquine is that the patents run out, so it costs about $5 to make. Like literally, that's anyhow. I have COVID-19. I've been taking tests, trying to get a negative test. So my life can get back to whatever is normal nowadays. I've been living in my basement basically for almost a month now. But so I apologize if everything kind of smears into hydrochloroquine, but it is tied. This virus is, and our reaction of it is tied to China. It is. And I can see it. And the Pope is tied to China. He is. And I can see it. But I'm John. This is the Abercast. I hope you guys enjoyed this bonus show. And I'll see you on Sunday. I'll let Hillett tell you what to do. Hey, did you learn something? No. I said I'll let Hillett tell you what to do.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I am proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.